This is the Conscious Hour, and there's always comes a time when great nations fail. And if you were living in the United States, you will see news that has nothing to do with the reality on the ground. And that's negligence by the US media, but they're owned by the zebras. And so therefore they're controlled, and they don't want you to believe that they actually have no chance, Israel and the United States, to win this war. Unless they use nuclear weapons and blow the world up. But let's have a look here with something that you aren't allowed to see on US media because for some reason they don't want to tell you the truth.
Ran with it. That is not evolving terminology. That is managed denial. Most people think the US is repositioning forces to prepare for a new phase. In reality, it is abandoning positions that Iran made untenable and repackaging each retreat with a gentler word than the last. Stay with me, because what Iran is doing with the Strait of Hormuz is the part of this war that will still be hurting long after the last missile lands. On March 2nd, IRGC senior advisor Ebrahim Jabari announced the strait was closed and any vessel attempting passage would be set ablaze. 21 confirmed attacks on merchant ships, followed by March 12th. Traffic collapsed, first by 70%, then to effectively zero for Western-flagged vessels. Over 150 ships anchored outside the strait rather than risk the crossing. This is the largest disruption to global energy supply since the 1970s. But here is what most coverage misses. Iran did not need a navy to close the strait. It needed about 24 attacks on commercial vessels. That was enough to break the private sector math. Ship owners cannot get insurance. After the strikes began, most major underwriters at Lloyd's of London simply stopped writing new policies for Hormuz transit. Crews have the legal right under international maritime law to refuse to sail into a declared war zone. Some captains are reportedly being offered $500,000 a day to attempt the crossing. That is not a functioning shipping lane. That is a lottery ticket with a warhead attached. Even if every Iranian naval asset were destroyed tomorrow, the commercial infrastructure that makes global shipping possible through that corridor, the insurance, the crewing contracts, the port liability frameworks, has already collapsed. And rebuilding commercial confidence takes far longer than rebuilding a ship. 20% of the world's daily oil supply transits that waterway. 20% of global LNG does too. Brent crude jumped from roughly $65 a barrel before the war to a peak of $126. Qatar Energy declared force majeure on all LNG shipments on March 4th. Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, MSC, and CMA CGM all suspended operations. And the damage is spreading beyond energy. The urea fertilizer prices jumped by roughly $80 a ton from pre-war levels of around $470, hitting farmers just as spring planting began. Roughly a third of global fertilizer trade transits the Strait of Hormuz. That price spike is arriving just as American farmers enter the spring planting window for corn and soybeans. Iran then made a calculated move on March 5th. The strait is closed to American, Israeli, and Western allied vessels. But Turkish ships were cleared through. Indian-flagged carriers passed. Saudi tankers heading to India were allowed. China, which receives 45% of its oil via Hormuz, is negotiating directly with Tehran for guaranteed safe passage. Japan, which gets 70% of its Middle Eastern crude through the strait, has already asked its government to release strategic petroleum reserves. Iran turned a military blockade into a selective toll booth. Allies of America are being forced to negotiate directly with the country that America is bombing, and the American response has been incoherent. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said on March 13th, the Navy is not ready to escort tankers. Hours later, Treasury Secretary Bessent told Sky News the Navy would begin escorting ships as soon as militarily possible. Defense Secretary Hegseth waved it off entirely. Do not need to worry about it. Trump called on allies to send warships. Japan, Australia, South Korea, the UK, Germany, and Greece all declined. Germany said as long as this war continues, there will be no participation. The UK said it will not be drawn into the wider war. Not one allied nation has committed a single vessel. That isolation is new, and it is significant. Saudi Arabia has started rerouting crude oil to the Red Sea port of Yanbu through its east-west pipeline. By mid-March, tanker traffic at Saudi Red Sea ports had jumped sharply, a visible sign of how much export traffic was being rerouted away from Hormuz. Saudi Arabia has pushed far more crude through its east-west pipeline to Yanbu, reaching about 5.9 million barrels a day, with full capacity near 7 million. But that still falls far short of the volumes that normally move through Hormuz. The gap does not close, and the Red Sea route itself remains exposed to Houthi disruption. There is no clean workaround here. Every alternative route is either too small, too slow, or too dangerous. Now consider what happened next, because this is where the war crossed a threshold that most people have not fully absorbed. On March 7th, Iran accused the United States of striking a desalination facility on Keshem Island, an allegation Washington has not confirmed. The next day, Bahrain reported that an Iranian drone had damaged a desalination plant on its soil. That exchange matters more than it sounds. The Persian Gulf runs on desalination. About 400 plants across the Gulf states produce 40% of the world's desalinated water. Bahrain depends on those plants for roughly 90% of its drinking water. Kuwait, the same. Oman sits at 86%. Saudi Arabia at 70%. These are not backup systems. This is the entire water supply. During the 1990 to 91 Gulf War, Iraq deliberately destroyed most of Kuwait's desalination capacity. It took years to recover. The difference now is the scale. Roughly 100 million people across the region depend on these facilities for the water they drink every day. The logic Iran has established is direct. You hit our water, we hit theirs. And theirs means the Gulf states hosting American troops. The Arab allies of the United States did not agree to have their civilian water systems turned into targets. That political calculation is shifting in real time, and we will come back to what it means for the coalition that does not exist. Towards the end here, I want to show you the messaging collapse, because this is where the absence of a plan becomes impossible to disguise. Trump told the Daily Mail on March 1st the conflict would last 4 weeks or so. On March 6th, he said there are no time limits. On March 10th, he called the war very complete. That same day, Defense Secretary Hegseth appeared on 60 Minutes and said this is only just the beginning. A reporter asked Trump which one was true. He said you could say both. White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt said the initial timeline was 4 to 6 weeks. On March 15th, Trump told NBC that Iran was ready to make a deal, but the terms were not good enough. The next day, Iran's foreign minister went on CBS and said plainly, Iran has never asked for a ceasefire. Plan A was air superiority, regime collapse, negotiated ceasefire. The regime did not collapse. A new IRGC commander was appointed within 24 hours. Mojtaba Khamenei was named the new supreme leader within a week. The ceasefire was rejected publicly. Not one ally agreed to help reopen Hormuz. The top counterterrorism official at the State Department resigned and said Iran posed no imminent threat before the strikes even began. There is no plan B, there is no coalition, there is no defined end state, and every week the cost climbs. A single Patriot interceptor runs between $3 and $4 million. The Shahed drones it is shooting down Iran roughly 20
And the
to
bottom
50,000
line
each.
is that
Analysts at the German Institute for
there's
International and
nothing
Security Affairs
that Mr. Hegseth can do. He's getting us into a war that they will never win, and all of our people will be sacrificed because of Pete Hegseth.